Hello everybody and welcome back to Safari Mack Explores North America. I'm Safari Mack, your guide and host, helping you make connections to the wild. Wow, can you believe that we've been to a lot of different places in Alaska that it's a wonder for me that we're not all turned around and confused. But to give you some clarification and to be precise about where we are now, we are actually back down south to the city of Homer, to be exact, where we're going to explore the marshland regions and an animal that tends to occupy these lands. In fact, I can actually see and hear them coming right now. Meet the Canada goose, or Canadian geese, otherwise known by their Latin name of Branta canadensis. So find your spot in the V formation as we get ready to go on migration with these guys down south. But if you're new to my channel, before we begin, hit that like and subscribe button. Check out my Facebook page for conservation content. And finally, if there's a question about animals or if you have an animal that you want me to do in the future, all you got to do is just send me an email, which you will always find the link to down in my description below. But if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's take flight. For starters, we'll start off, of course, with their family and their evolution. Now, you may recall this beautiful creature, the trumpeter swan, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go watch that after this. But this creature was one of our last animals that we met during our time in Yellowstone National Park. But now, why am I bringing this creature up? Well, the swan is basically part of the same family as geese as well as ducks. So they are part of the Anissiformes family, but let me tell you a little bit of a quick reminder of their history. Or you can check out the trumpeter swan video for that if you want to. But for just a quick review, these creatures were the ancestors at least, were thought to have originated during the time of the dinosaurs, but they would, unlike the dinosaurs, they actually escaped the extinction event by either diving underwater or hiding in burrows. So from there, at around 10 to 12 million years ago, it was thought that they had originated in this central Italian region of Gargano. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. But from there, wild geese would eventually branch out and spread to different parts all over the world. Now, North America has a good number of subspecies of Canadian geese, believe it or not. But here in Alaska, they are known by the lesser, the dusky, and the Vancouver Canada goose. However, we're just going to focus on the species as a whole instead of focusing on just one subspecies. I just wanted to give you exactly the kind that you would see if you happen to be visiting Alaska. Now, let's get into their habitat, their lifestyle, and even their family life. So, for a Canada goose, what better place to live than the wetland region? A true paradise of two worlds, the land and the water. Here, not only can they escape predators, but they can find themselves plentiful food, and it's the beautiful place to raise their families. But of course, it's not just the wetland regions that they're used to. Because these animals are highly adaptable, they're actually getting more used to living in human settings, such as parks, unfortunately, golf courses, and neighborhoods. But they are also known to be found in like the marine environments. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be out there in the ocean, but more like the bays, the inlets, basically a nice little mix from the fresh water to the salt water. I mean, heck, every now and then we gotta keep ourselves energized, or we gotta keep ourselves occupied by different places. But here I'd like to show you a little map of exactly of where you can find Canadian geese in North America. As today I'm going to ignore where they are found as invasive species or introduced to different parts of the world. So we're gonna forget about that. We're just gonna focus here in North America. So here in Canada, as well as in Alaska, you can see that Canadian geese breed during the summer up in the north. But during the winter, they will head down south. But we're going to get more into that a little bit later as well. Now, let's talk about their family life. So, Canadian geese do not start breeding until they're roughly around 2 to 3 years old, and they have a way of finding a mate called assortative mating, meaning the male and the female will seek out those that are roughly around the same size as each other. So, if the male is way bigger, no thank you. If the male is too small, forget it. If the male is just the same height as the female, they will breed. Together, they'll produce around 2 to 8 eggs, to where mom and dad take turns incubating them, keeping them warm and keeping them alive, and eventually they hatch. So when they hatch, these creatures go through an immense growth cycle, and I really do mean immense, because as soon as almost less than an hour after they're born, mom and dad take them to the water to begin their swimming lessons, and even learning how to dive underwater. Can you imagine having to do that? I mean, it's pretty extreme enough when you consider it with nature. I mean, for most animals, at least prey animals, living out in the open means that there's no time for you to waste practicing. You have to be able to walk or stand within minutes at birth, or better yet, you better run. But not Canadian geese, no. So they stick with mom and dad for a while, at least until they're well over a year old. But what they're doing in that time, they're eating and they're learning from mom and dad all what it means to be Canada geese, how to be aggressive towards threats, how to recognize each other amongst thousands, and above all, eventually, especially once they reach a certain age, at least 2 to 3 months, learning how to fly. But we'll get into that a little later. Let's continue with their diet. Now, as I've mentioned in my trumpeter swan episode, ducks are carnivorous as well as herbivorous, so they're really omnivorous. Geese are a little bit more towards the swan's style, which they're herbivorous, where they eat grasses as well as different grains and corns, especially when they're hanging out in the agricultural regions of leftover crops. However, they're also known to eat mollusks, like this snail, and sometimes they will also catch fish to fuel their immense growth cycle, or just eating so much so that they can maintain their bodies, because birds are what you would call a high maintenance animal. They have to eat a lot just to keep themselves from crashing, because if they don't get enough, their own metabolism can actually, in a way, kill them. Now, normally with these episodes, I would end it with the animal's influence in human culture, but we're not doing that today. Today, we're going to do a 2-part region, where we'll get into part 2 next week, on migration. So, let's talk about it. As I've already mentioned, Canadian geese won't start learning to fly until they're around 2 to 3 months of age. So, what they're doing, they're having to eat as much as possible, so that all that food and energy that they've gathered will help them keep endurance during one of the first biggest epic moments of their life, learning how to fly for the first time, and eventually following with their mom and dad down south on migration. So these creatures, as soon as the cold weather sets in, it's time to go. And yet nowadays, the question is, are Canadian geese still flying south today? Unfortunately, I can't tell you right now. What I can tell you is you'll have to tune in next week for part 2 on this epic quest of migration. But until next week, be sure to check out my upcoming next episode of Safari Mack's Zoo Field Trips, where I took my time down in Zoo Miami. And until next week then, this is Safari Mack. I'll see you all out there.